The horse sensed it first. On a cold November morning in Windsor, a king's guard sat perfectly still on his mount outside the castle gates. His name was Private James Harlow, 23 years old. 2 years of service. A record so clean, it sparkled. But today, something would crack that record wide open. The horse beneath him. A massive black gelding named Sovereign began shifting his weight. Left, then right. His ears flicked backward. James felt the tension ripple through the animal's muscles. Sovereign had carried him through rainstorms and protests, through screaming tourists and flash photography. The horse never flinched. Until now. "Easy, boy," James whispered, barely moving his lips. Guards weren't supposed to speak, weren't supposed to move. They were living statues in red tunics and bearskin hats. Symbols of a tradition older than anyone watching. A black Mercedes pulled up to the cordoned area. Doors opened. Security personnel stepped out first, scanning the crowd. Then came the assistants. The photographers. The lighting crew, and then her Camilla, the queen consort, emerged in a cream-colored coat and pearl earrings. She smiled at the waiting cameras. This was supposed to be a quick photo opportunity. A charity event. Something warm and relatable for the press. But Sovereign's ears went flat against his skull. James felt it immediately. The horse's breathing changed. Faster. Harder. His hooves scraped against the cobblestones. This wasn't nervousness. This was something else. Something James had only seen once before, during a barn fire at training camp. Pure primal refusal. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this story, hit that subscribe button. We bring you the most emotional real-life moments you won't find anywhere else. A royal coordinator approached James. She wore a headset and carried a clipboard like a shield. "Need you to move back about 20 feet, she said, pointing to a spot behind the fountain. "Just for the photographs. 10 minutes maximum." James didn't respond. He wasn't supposed to. But even if he could, Sovereign had already made the decision for both of them. The horse planted his hooves. "Excuse me," the coordinator said again, louder this time. "We need this area clear." Sovereign's massive head swung toward Camilla. Not aggressive. Not threatening. But his eyes showed white at the edges. His nostrils flared. Every muscle in his 1,500-pound body went rigid. James knew horses. His grandfather had trained them. His father had raced them. James had grown up in stables, learning to read animal behavior before he could read books. And right now, Sovereign was screaming a message that only James could hear. "Stay away from her." The coordinator's smile was thinning. Security guards were starting to notice. One of them whispered into his radio. Camilla herself glanced over, still smiling, but her eyes held a question. "Private," the coordinator hissed. "This is a direct request. Move the horse. Now." But Sovereign wouldn't budge, and something deep in James's gut told him not to make him. The morning sun glinted off the castle. Stones. Tourists raised their phones. Someone in the crowd laughed, thinking this was part of the show. But James could feel sweat beading under his heavy uniform despite the cold. Sovereign stamped once. Twice. A warning. What the horse sensed. James couldn't explain, but refusing a royal request was about to change everything. Asterisk. The coordinator's face flushed red. "A Private Harlow," she said, reading his name badge. "I will report this insubordination. Move the horse." But James couldn't, not because he was being stubborn. Because Sovereign had locked every joint in his body. The horse had become a statue, just like the guard was supposed to be. A senior officer approached. Captain Morris, 20 years of service. A man who'd stood guard for 3 monarchs. His face was carved from stone, but his eyes held something softer. He'd been a cavalry officer before transferring to the guards. He understood horses. "Private," Morris said quietly. "What's the situation?" James broke protocol. "He had to, sir. The horse won't move." "Something's wrong." Maurice's eyes flicked to Sovereign. He saw what James saw. The rigid stance. The flared nostrils. the ears pinned back so flat they nearly disappeared into the black mane. Has he been like this before? Never, sir. Maurice stepped closer to Sovereign, careful not to startle him. He'd seen enough horses in his career to know when an animal was being stubborn and when an animal was being protective. This was the latter. Camilla's security. Detail was getting impatient. One of them, a thick-necked man with an earpiece, walked directly toward James. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "We're on a schedule." He reached out to grab Sovereign's bridle. The horse reared, not high. Not dramatic, but enough to make the security guard stumble backward, his polished shoes slipping on the cobblestones. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cameras clicked like mechanical insects. "Back away," Maurice commanded. Everyone back away from the horse. But the damage was done. The moment was captured. A King's Guard's horse rearing up just meters from the Queen Consort. Social media would explode within the hour. Camilla herself stepped forward, waving off her assistants. "Perhaps we should move the photoshoot," she said gracefully. "I don't want to distress the animal." But as she spoke, Sovereign's reaction intensified. His eyes rolled. His breath came in short, sharp bursts. James had to grip the reins tighter to stay mounted, and then he smelled. It faint, chemical, like cleaning solution mixed with something floral. It was coming from the direction of Camilla's entourage, not from her directly, but from someone nearby. Sovereign smelled it too. His reaction made sense now. One of the assistants, a woman in her 30s carrying a leather bag, stood just behind Camilla. She was adjusting something in her bag. Her movements were quick, nervous. Morris noticed her too. His eyes narrowed. "Ma'am," he said to Camilla, "we may need to clear the entire area. Standard security protocol." But the assistant was already moving. She pushed through the crowd, walking fast toward the Mercedes. Too fast, security noticed. One of them spoke into his radio. "Stop that woman," someone shouted. But she was already in the car. The engine started. James watched as 3 security vehicles blocked the Mercedes before it could leave the palace grounds. The assistant was pulled from the car. Her bag was seized. And inside, wrapped in silk scarves to mask the scent, they found 3 small bottles. Liquid nicotine concentrate. Enough to poison an animal. Or worse, the plan had been simple. Get close during the photo shoot. While everyone watched Camilla, the assistant would approach Sovereign, would be moved away from the main crowd for the photographs. A few drops on the horse's muzzle. The animal would panic, throw his rider, and in the chaos, the real attack would happen. But Sovereign had sensed the poison, before anyone knew it existed, and James had trusted his horse. The assistant was handcuffed, led away. The entire area erupted into controlled chaos as security swept everyone and everything. Camilla was rushed back to her vehicle, her face pale but composed. Captain Morris stood beside James, who was finally allowed to dismount. His legs nearly gave out. Adrenaline and fear had been holding him upright for 15 minutes that felt like 15 hours. "You did well, Private," Morris said. "You trusted your instincts." "I trusted him, sir," James replied, stroking Sovereign's neck. The horse was finally calming, his breathing returning to normal. But the morning wasn't over yet, because someone had planned this. Someone had sent that woman, and the investigation was just beginning. James wasn't allowed to leave. They brought him to a private room inside the castle. Not under arrest, but not free to go either. 2 men in suits sat across from him. MI5. The kind of men who asked questions that felt like scalpels. "Tell us everything," the older one said. "From the moment you noticed the horse's behavior," James recounted it all. Sovereign's tension. The pinned ears. The refusal to move. The chemical smell. He left nothing out, even though his hands were shaking as he spoke. "Did you see anyone approach the horse before the incident?" "No, sir. But Sovereign reacted to something in the air. He's trained to handle crowds, noise, stress. He's never behaved like that." The younger agent leaned forward. "Private Harlow, you may have prevented something catastrophic today, but we need to understand exactly what your horse sensed and when." Outside the room, James could hear urgent voices. footsteps echoing down stone corridors. The palace had gone into full lockdown. Every person who'd been at the photo shoot was being questioned. Every bag searched. Every background checked. The assistant they'd arrested wasn't talking. She sat in a holding cell with a lawyer who'd appeared within 20 minutes. Professional, expensive, the kind of lawyer that raised more questions than answers. But the bottles told their own story. Forensics confirmed it within hours. Liquid nicotine concentrate, industrial strength, mixed with a solvent designed to evaporate quickly and leave minimal trace. A few drops on a horse's sensitive muzzle would cause immediate distress, panic, possibly cardiac arrest in an animal. But that wasn't the real target. In the chaos of a panicking horse and a throne rider, the assistant would have had access to Camilla. Close access. And in her coat pocket, hidden in a false lining, they found something else. A syringe. Empty, but recently used. The laboratory was still running tests. Preliminary results suggested a paralytic agent. Fast-acting, nearly undetectable in the crucial first minutes. By the time medical help arrived, it might have been too late. James didn't learn these details until later. Right now, he sat in that stone room drinking tea someone had brought him, wondering if he'd just lived through a history book moment or a nightmare. Captain Morris entered. His face was grave. "Private, you're being reassigned temporarily. We're moving you to secure quarters. The press is outside the gates. Your name is already circulating online. For your safety, you can't go home tonight." "What about Sovereign?" "The horse is in the royal stables. Under guard. He's being treated like the crown jewels right now." Maurice sat down. For the first time that day, he looked tired. "Between you and me, Harlow, that horse saved lives today. Yours. Possibly Camilla's." Still piecing together how extensive this plot was. James's throat went dry. "Plot, sir? It wasn't just one person. We don't know yet. But someone funded this. Someone coordinated it. Someone knew the exact time and location of that photo shoot. This wasn't random. The weight of it settled over James like a lead blanket. He was 23. He'd joined the King's Guard to serve. To stand at attention and protect tradition. He'd never imagined standing between a horse and an assassination attempt. "Will I be able to see him?" James asked. "Sovereign, I mean?" Maurice nodded. "Soon, but first, there's someone who wants to meet you." James's stomach dropped. "Sir?" "The king himself. He's requesting to speak with you and to see the horse that potentially saved his wife's life." An hour later, James stood in a private stable, still in his red tunic, but without the heavy bearskin hat. His hair was matted with sweat. His face was pale. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt like a private who'd gotten very, very lucky. Sovereign stood in a spacious stall, munching hay like nothing had happened. The horse glanced at James and made a soft sound, almost like a greeting. "He looks calm now," a voice said. James spun around. King Charles stood in the stable doorway, flanked by two discreet security officers. He wore a simple suit. No crown, no ceremony. Just a man who'd nearly lost his wife. "Your Majesty," James stammered, attempting to bow. "At ease, Private Harlow." Charles approached the stall, his eyes on Sovereign. "May I?" James opened the stall door. Charles stepped inside, moving slowly, respectfully. He'd been around horses his entire life. He knew how to approach them. Sovereign allowed the king to touch his neck. The horse's ears swiveled forward, relaxed. "Remarkable," Charles murmured. "They say animals have instincts we've lost. I believe that today." He turned to James. "You trusted your horse when others wanted you to ignore him. That trust may have saved my wife's life. I won't forget that." James didn't know what to say. His throat felt tight. "Thank you, sir," he managed. Charles studied him for a moment. "You're young. This isn't what you signed up for, is it?" "No, sir. But I'd do it again." And he meant it. Asterisk, the news broke that evening, not the full story. Security kept the details classified, but enough leaked to create a firestorm. Kingsguard refuses to move horse. Disrupts royal photo shoot, read one headline. Stubborn guard or secret hero? Asked another. James watched from a secured apartment inside the castle grounds. His phone had been buzzing non-stop until Morris confiscated it. For his own protection, they said. The internet was digging into his life. His family. His friends. Everything. His mother called the palace 17 times. They let him speak to her briefly. Under supervision? James, what's happening? Her voice cracked with worry. The news is saying you disrupted a royal event. Are you in trouble? Ma'am, I can't explain everything right now, but I'm safe. I promise. I did the right thing. Your father would be proud, she whispered. He always said, trust the horse before you trust anyone else. James's father had died 3 years ago. Riding accident. A spooked horse. A bad fall. James had almost quit riding entirely after that. But his father's last words to him had been about Sovereign, the young gelding he'd been training. That horse has a good heart. James, he'll watch out for you. Sitting in this strange apartment with guards outside his door, James understood what his father meant. The investigation moved quickly. By midnight, MI5 had traced the assistant's background. Her real name was Alina Petrov. Russian-born, British citizen, no criminal record. She'd worked for a prestigious event planning company for 3 years. Impeccable references. Background checks had cleared her, but someone had gotten to her 6 months ago. Bank transfers. Small amounts spread across multiple accounts. Untraceable on the surface, but forensic accountants were unraveling the threads. £50,000 total. Payment for a single job. Get close to Camilla. Wait for the right moment. Execute the plan. But why? That's what the investigators couldn't figure out. Alina wasn't talking. Her lawyer was stalling. And whoever hired her had covered their tracks well. James learned all this 3 days later. When Captain Morris briefed him in private, "We're going public with your story," Morris said. "Controlled release. The truth, or at least the parts we can share. You'll be painted as a hero. The guard who trusted his instincts and his horse? I don't want to be a hero, sir. Doesn't matter what you want, Private. You already are one." The official statement went out the next morning. Private James Harlow and his horse Sovereign had detected a security threat during a royal event. Details were classified, but their actions had prevented a serious incident. The king himself commended their service. Social media exploded, this time in James's favor. That guard literally saved the queen consort's life. The horse, KNEW. Animals sense things we can't. This is why we still have these traditions. They're not just for show. But not everyone was celebrating. That night, James received a message. It came through an encrypted channel delivered by MI5 to his secure location. The sender was anonymous, but the message was clear. The horse should have moved. This isn't over. Morris's face went dark when he read it. We're increasing your security. You don't go anywhere alone. Not to the bathroom. Not to the stables. Nowhere. They're threatening me. They're threatening everyone involved. We've intercepted similar messages sent to investigators to palace staff. Whoever planned this has resources and reach. Out. James felt cold. What do they want? That's what we're trying to figure out. The answer came from an unexpected source. Alina Petrov's lawyer made a deal. In exchange for protection and a reduced sentence, Alina would talk. And what she revealed changed everything. She'd been approached online. Anonymous contact. They knew everything about her. Her debts. Her sick brother who needed expensive medical treatment. Her desperation. They offered money. A lot of it. All she had to do was get hired by the event company, work her way into royal events, and wait for instructions. The instructions came 2 weeks before the photo shoot. Simple, elegant, brutal. Use the liquid nicotine to panic the horse. In the chaos, inject Camilla with the paralytic. Make it look like an accident. A panicked animal. A tragic coincidence. By the time anyone suspected foul play, Alina would be gone, her debts paid. Her brother's treatment funded, but she didn't know who hired her. All contact was through encrypted messages that deleted themselves. All payments were cryptocurrency, laundered through a dozen accounts. Who benefits from Camilla's death? Morris asked the MI5 agents during a late-night briefing that James was allowed to observe. The room went quiet. "That's a very dangerous question, Captain," one agent said. "And the answer could reach very high. Political rivals, foreign governments, radical groups." The list of potential suspects was long and terrifying. But there was something else. Something Alina mentioned that made everyone in the room freeze. "They knew about the horse," she said during her interrogation. "They told me specifically which guard would be on duty, which horse he'd be riding. They said the horse was the key. If I could panic the horse, everything else would fall into place." Someone inside the palace had leaked information. Someone close enough to know the guard rotations, the horse assignments, the exact timing of the photo shoot. The investigation had just become a manhunt, and James was sitting at the center of it. The palace became a place of whispers and suspicion. Every staff member was questioned again. Every guard, every coordinator. Anyone who had access to the duty rosters and event schedules. Trust the foundation of royal service cracked like thin ice. James wasn't allowed back to regular duties. He spent his days in the secure apartment, reading reports he probably shouldn't have seen, and visiting Sovereign under armed escort. The horse had become the most protected animal in Britain.
Ow.
The guard and his horse. Media loves a good story. Did they know someone tried to kill the Queen Consort? They know there was a security threat. We've kept the details vague. Assassination attempt sounds too dramatic. Makes people panic. James stroked Sovereign's nose. The horse leaned into his touch, eyes half closed. Peaceful, like that terrible morning never happened. "Have they found who leaked the information?" James asked. Morris's silence was answer enough. The investigation was stalling. Whoever the insider was, they'd covered their tracks perfectly. No unusual communications. No strange behavior. No financial red flags. It was like hunting a ghost, but ghosts leave traces. 3 weeks after the incident, a junior analyst in MI5 noticed something. A pattern in the palace Wi-Fi logs. Someone had accessed the guard rotation schedule from an unauthorized device. Just once. 2 months before the photo shoot, the device was registered to a maintenance worker named Colin Price. 56 years old. 23 years of service. Divorced. 2 grown children. Spotless record. They brought him in for questioning. Colin sat in the interrogation room confused and frightened. His hands shook as he held a cup of tea. "I don't understand," he kept saying. "I would never hurt anyone. This is my life. This place is my life." But the evidence was there. His device. His access credentials. His fingerprints on the digital breadcrumbs. "Someone used your login," the interrogator said. "Either you did it, or someone with access to your credentials did." Colin's face went pale. "My tablet. I lost it 2 months ago. Reported it to it. They issued me a new one." The room went silent. "You reported a lost device?" "Yes. I thought I left it in the break room. It said they'd wipe it remotely. They gave me a new one the next day." The investigators exchanged glances. They checked IT records. Colin was telling the truth. He'd reported the loss. But the remote wipe had never been completed. Someone in it had marked it as done, but the device remained active. The investigation shifted to the IT department. There were 12 people with the access needed to fake a remote wipe. 12 people who could have kept Colin's tablet active and used it to access classified schedules. One of them was a 32-year-old systems administrator named David Fletcher. 8 years of service. Excellent performance reviews. Engaged to be married. Nothing suspicious, except he'd taken a week of vacation to Cyprus 6 months ago, and his bank account showed a deposit of £15,000 2 weeks after he returned. He'd explained it as inheritance from an aunt. MI5 dug deeper. There was no aunt. No inheritance. The money came from a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands. They arrested David at his desk. He didn't resist, didn't say a word, just stared at his computer screen as they led him away. His apartment told the story. Encrypted drives, burner phones. Instructions printed and then burned, but forensics found traces in his fireplace. He'd been recruited during that Cyprus vacation, compromised, blackmailed, or bribed, or both. His job was simple. Keep Colin's tablet active. Use it to access schedules. Pass information to his handlers. He probably didn't even know what it would be used for. But David Fletcher wasn't the mastermind. He was another tool, like Elena. Pawns on a chessboard played by someone they'd never meet. The investigation traced his contacts to a network of intermediaries across Europe. Each one knew only their small piece of the puzzle. The money trail disappeared into cryptocurrency exchanges and offshore accounts. Dead end after dead end. Until someone made a mistake. One of the intermediaries, a woman in Prague, got nervous. She'd seen the news about the failed attack. She knew the British authorities were closing in. So she ran. She fled to a safe house in Germany. But MI6 was watching. They tracked her. Waited. And when she made contact with her handler, they were listening. The handler was in London, not a foreign operative, not a political extremist, a British citizen, a businessman named Marcus Wainwright, 61 years old, wealthy, connected, a donor to various charities, including several that Camilla patronized. He'd met her twice, shaken her hand at fundraisers, smiled for photographs, and he'd planned to kill her. Why? That was the question that haunted everyone. Marcus had money, status, no obvious motive. But when they searched his properties, it found something that explained everything. Letters, dozens of them, handwritten, never sent. All addressed to Camilla. Marcus had lost his wife 4 years ago. Cancer he'd begged for. Camilla's patronage to help fund a research center in his wife's name. She'd politely declined. Her schedule was full. Her commitments were set. It was a normal response. She couldn't support every cause, no matter how worthy. But Marcus had taken it personally. The grief had twisted into obsession, then into hatred. In his mind, Camilla had killed his wife by refusing to help. It was delusional, irrational, but grief doesn't follow logic. He'd spent 2 years and a fortune planning his revenge. Recruiting people, building networks, creating a plan that would make her death look like an accident. But he'd never counted on a horse. When they arrested Marcus in his London penthouse, he didn't seem surprised. He sat in his leather chair, surrounded by photos of his late wife, and said only one thing. The beast should have moved. The trial was closed to the public. National security, they said. Too many sensitive details. But the verdict was never in doubt. Marcus Wainwright was sentenced to life imprisonment. No parole. Alina Petrov received 15 years with a chance of early release for cooperation. David Fletcher got 12 years, Colin Price. The maintenance worker whose tablet had been stolen was cleared of all suspicion. He returned to work, but the palace didn't feel the same to him anymore. He retired 6 months later. For James, life slowly returned to normal, or at least a new version of normal. He was transferred to a different unit. Promoted to Lance Corporal. Given a commendation that would sit in a classified file for the next 50 years, the king personally thanked him again, this time in private, away from cameras and ceremony. "You and that horse," Charles had said, "you remind me that sometimes the old ways work. Tradition isn't just theater. It's wisdom passed down through generations." But the real conversation James needed to have wasn't with royalty. On a quiet morning in early spring, he took Sovereign out for a ride in Windsor Great Park. Just the two of them. No security detail in sight, though he knew they were watching from a distance. The sun was warm. The trees were budding. Sovereign moved with that easy, powerful grace that made riding him feel like floating. James patted the horse's neck. "You knew, didn't you?" he said softly. "You smelled something wrong, something dangerous, and you refused to move." Sovereign's ears swiveled back, listening. "My father always said you had a good heart." that you'd protect me. I think you've protected a lot more than just me that day." The horse snorted, almost like he understood. They rode in silence for a while, following a path through ancient oaks. James thought about everything that had happened. The fear, the confusion, the moment when he'd had to choose between following orders and trusting his instincts. He'd chosen trust, and that choice had saved lives. The media eventually moved on to other stories. The palace tightened security. New protocols were implemented. Background checks became more rigorous. It was like closing a wound with stitches, knowing the scar would always be there. James received letters, hundreds of them, from people all over the world, some thanking him, some asking for advice, some just wanting to tell their own stories. About times when they'd trusted their instincts against all odds, one letter stood out. It was from a young girl, maybe 8 years old, written in careful block letters with a crayon drawing of a horse attached. "Dear soldier, my grandpa says animals are smarter than people sometimes. I think your horse is a hero. Please give him a carrot for me. Love, Sophie." James kept that letter, pinned it on the wall of his quarters. On bad days, when the nightmares came, when he relived those moments of fear and uncertainty, he'd read it and remember why he served. 6 months later, there was a small ceremony, private, just palace staff and a few officials. Sovereign was formally recognized for his service. They didn't give medals to horses, but they made an exception. A brass plaque was mounted in the royal stables. Sovereign, Defender of the Crown, November 2025. The horse stood patiently through the ceremony, probably more interested in the sugar cubes someone kept sneaking him than the speeches being made. Camilla was there. She approached Sovereign carefully, letting him smell her hand first. The horse sniffed, considered, and then allowed her to stroke his neck. "I owe you my life," she said quietly. Though whether she was talking to the horse or to James wasn't clear, maybe it didn't matter. They'd both played their part. As the ceremony ended and people drifted away, James stayed behind in the stable. He opened Sovereign's stall and stepped inside, resting his forehead against the horse's neck. "We did it," he whispered. "We did the impossible thing. We stood still when everyone wanted us to move. And we were right." Sovereign made a soft sound, somewhere between a sigh and a rumble. Outside, the world continued. Tourists took photos. Guards stood at attention. The palace maintained its ancient rhythms. But in that quiet stable, young soldier and his horse shared a moment of perfect understanding. Trust wasn't just about following orders. It was about knowing when to stand firm, when to refuse, when to listen to the voice that spoke louder than authority or protocol or fear. James's father had been right. Sovereign did have a good heart, and hearts, whether human or animal, know truth when they sense it. They know danger, they know loyalty, they know love. And on that cold November morning, when the world wanted them to move, and they refused, they knew something else too, sometimes. The bravest thing you can do is stand perfectly still. James left the stable as the sun set over Windsor Castle. Sovereign watched him go, then returned to his hay, peaceful and content. A horse who'd changed history without ever understanding what history meant. But he understood one thing perfectly. He'd protected his rider. And that was all a good horse needed to do. The media would analyze the incident for years. Security experts would write papers on protocols and threats. Historians would add footnotes to books about the modern monarchy. But for James Harlow, the lesson was simpler. Trust your instincts, trust your training, and trust the beast who carries you through the darkness. Because sometimes the beast sees what we cannot. Sovereign had refused to move, and in that refusal, he'd saved a life, maybe several lives, and reminded everyone. Who heard the story that heroes don't always wear crowns or carry swords? Sometimes they wear saddles and eat. Hey, sometimes they're 23-year-old. Soldiers who've learned that courage isn't about being fearless, it's about being afraid and choosing to trust anyway. James went home that night to his small apartment. He called his mother. He ate a simple dinner. He went to bed like it was any other day, but it wasn't any other day. It was the day. He learned that standing still could change the world, and that sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is simply, "No, the beast does not move, and neither do I."